Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting me be a part of your semester. I hope you're getting a lot out of the content and are making some connections with others in the group. If there's one piece of advice that I'd give regarding leadership, it's that leaning on others around you is absolutely critical to sustaining long term success for your organization and for yourself personally. I'd like to share just a little bit about myself and then we'll get started. You can read the information on the screen, and I'll tell you that I have absolutely loved each and every one of my jobs within education. I'm such a firm believer in growing this fantastic and noble profession, which is what led me to teaching through Educate. You'll see my family there. My husband, of 23 years, is a special education teacher in a nearby district. My oldest son is doing his student teaching in the Hudson School District this fall, and my younger son is in his junior year at UW Eau Claire seeking a degree in physical education, health, and adaptive ed. You could say they are both joining the family business, and I couldn't be more proud. If there's one thing you can rely on in our work, it is that change will forever be a part of it. There's a saying that I really appreciate. It says, change is inevitable, growth is optional. Think about this for a moment. Change is inevitable, growth is optional. There is no way that our environments are not going to continue to change. COVID certainly taught us that. We can choose to either let the change happen and continue to put out fires along the way, or we can plot our course towards improvement very intentionally. We can paint the vision of the school we want and the outcomes we're looking for. We can engage all of those within to see this new possibility and be crystal clear about what their role is in the process. Use the data we have available to track our progress and keep a laser like focus on those few shared goals that are going to take you there. There are many graphics that will show you a process similar to this. School improvement services are something that people contract through their CISAs. Some contract with independent organizations, and others simply dig in and keep notes along the way. The important thing to remember is it's not the graphic and it's not the who does it, it's the components that are necessary to sustainable improvement. Throughout this module, we'll talk more about each one of the necessary components. However, they're not likely to be new information to you. I'll spend a little time talking about some of the tools that are included, as they will hopefully be helpful to you in your assignment that's coming up. So, we all work in schools right now. We aren't doing too badly. Why such a focus on continuous improvement? I think about continuous improvement in education as a moral imperative. Do the work. We owe it to the students to continuously get better at what we do so that we improve the outcomes and opportunities for them. The moral imperative is what we do for the students most marginalized, all the way through those are soaring. Our continuous learning for theirs. Schools have become very data rich, but are sometimes information poor. When you fail to dig into the data and identify strengths, you miss opportunities for celebration. When you finally can identify with absolute clarity the areas most in need of improvement efforts, you can finally make it actionable and do something about it. Best of all, you can begin to leverage the areas of strengths within your organization to begin the improvement process on the priority improvement areas you've identified. A quality school improvement planning process has each of the components listed in the slide. Again, there are so many different models with catchy names. The graphic designs, all of those pieces are not nearly as important as digging in and doing the work. We're going to talk through each one of these components briefly. And remember, one of your upcoming assignments is to develop your own school improvement plan. Knowing how important it is to craft and carefully take care of the culture within your building and your district, it's a big decision who needs to be at the table when you start talking about improvement efforts. I don't think there's one right answer and all the rest are wrong. I think it matters what part of the process you're in and what the culture in your community and your school is and how people are expected to engage on processes like this. If you're at a stage that it's vision casting, I'd say you should cast a very wide net. I believe strongly that schools exist to serve the communities that support them. You should be thinking business partners, elected officials in your area, representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, the PTO, civic groups, staff members from each of your employee groups, each of the buildings within the district should be represented. But if your building is taking that district wide strategic plan and setting annual goals and milestones, then perhaps that net is a bit smaller. You work with teacher leaders, a few key individuals from other employee groups, maybe a representative from the parent group that you work with. All of those would hit the mark for a building wide plan. Depending on the culture of your building, some have staff that are eager to get involved at this leadership level, and others are less so. They wait to be told what their piece is in the improvement efforts. I would caution you to be sure to not only talk about improvement efforts with your teaching staff, oftentimes there are almost as many support staff in a building, and their collective commitments can move mountains when they are valued and engaged in the process. Sometimes this takes some incredible feats of scheduling to make sure that your support staff people can be there when you're talking about this stuff, but don't shortchange them. The culture of your building and the improvement efforts of your building really must rest on everybody within and not just the administration, not just the teachers, but on every adult who interacts with students throughout the day should be included as a stakeholder in that group. The stakeholders we talked about on the previous slide were people that we had control over inviting to the table or not. Depending on the school that you're in and what federal programs you are part of, there are requirements for annual improvement efforts, tracking and monitoring progress, etc. There are times that you may find yourself in a situation where you lose the opportunity to do your improvement planning independently. Sometimes one of these outside forces will direct your efforts. While it may not feel good to you as a leader, the resources within the links are excellent and certainly won't lead you astray. Needs assessments can be extremely complicated, or they can really be quite simple. I would advocate that while you want to be able to track data longitudinally, it's okay to use different assessment tools over time. For example, we have a mixture of annual surveys, annual data sources that we analyze, and then some feedback that we elicit every 3 years. The goal is to make sure you're getting actionable data. And something I believe very strongly in is do not ask people for their opinion. Don't ask them for their input if you're not going to do anything with the feedback that you receive. I'm a strong believer in feedback is the gift you give someone when you respect them enough to want them to get better at what they do. So if you're including any kind of perception data in your work, please make sure you find a way to communicate that data back to people and what you're doing with the information that they've shared. So, as you sift through the enormous amounts of data available to you, it's going to be important to facilitate the discussions so that you land on 2 to 5, and I guess I'd say that 3 is probably a better top end to shoot for. I'm guessing you've heard the saying that if everything is a priority, nothing is. As the leader, you need to be able to continuously focus the discussions and the efforts back to those priorities. Laser like focus. Too many priorities makes it feel like you're scattered and trying to fix everything at once, as opposed to being strategic and perhaps mapping out multiple years of action planning. 2 to 3 priorities and do them really, really well. The links on the next page are examples of extremely comprehensive needs assessments. Take some time and dig through them. You're going to need to know about this piece for the assignment on writing a school improvement plan. I love this graphic. I know, I said before it's not about the graphic, but this one is really good. It's about making sure that each one of these components are included in your improvement efforts if you want to make sure you land at success. I've started using this within our district with my admin team as well as with our staff each time I'm introducing a complex change process. I really believe that people appreciate tools and particularly when they see the same tool being used multiple times. I think staff like predictability in their work and they like absolute clarity in what is expected of them. If we want success, our job as a leader is to ensure we give them that. An example of managing complex change would be the reopening of our schools this fall. We talked about the vision of why it was important to engage students in academics at a higher level than we did last spring when we were given 2 days to completely flip to at home learning. As far as skills, we planned PD during the summer as well as our kickoff week. These first couple of weeks have been filled with growing people's technology skills, both staff and students and families. As far as incentives, I firmly believe with all my heart that staff want kids to be successful and they want to feel great about the work that they're doing. I think the intrinsic motivation of people who get into education is significant. We as leaders just need to make sure we continue to connect their work to their emotional and intrinsic motivation. Engage them emotionally in the work that you're doing, and the incentives become self incentivized. When we talk about resources, we talk to all of our staff about all the PPE, the new protocols, the technology that we purchased. We talked about some building modifications, the changes to our schedule to provide them with the much needed time that they're going to need to make all these moving parts happen this year. We also talk sometimes in our district about resources. Staff have this perception that schools never have money for anything. And while that may feel true, I also try to make sure I communicate to staff that I don't know what it looks like in their role, and they should always advocate for themselves because if they don't, no one else is going to do that for them. So we ask that they continue to talk to us as needs arise throughout the year and don't always assume the answer is going to be no, but also recognize that sometimes the answer is going to be no, but we could put something on the list for future budgetary planning. Action plan. So this time we took time to talk together about what each person's role was going to be and how all those roles were going to fit together. If you skip any part of this process to manage complex change, you're not going to land at success. Take some time to consider a significant change initiative in your district. If it was successful, you can hopefully name what was done for each one of those components. If it was not successful, perhaps you can use this chart to identify what pieces were missed and see if you can help your leader out with a plan to address that. In Black River Falls, we're trying to help staff use this as a reflective and diagnostic tool. Feeling confused about what is expected of you, which of these columns did we miss? That's the conversation we're trying to have. If you are not already, you must take some time to become data literate. Use the free online tools that you see here. The state's put together some great resources. If your district uses another tool like EduClimber or whatever it may be, make sure that you as the leader can quickly gain access to the data that your team has decided will advise your progress towards your goals. I believe that the moment the leader cannot speak articulately about the data, it gives others within the organization a buy or a pass on data use to drive their improvement efforts. That is going to kill the efforts. While we are all about data, I also believe as leaders we need to make sure that we use data as a flashlight to show our best next steps, the direction that we want to go. Here's our action planning. This data is our flashlight moving forward, and not use that data as a hammer due to past performance. As we've talked about, teachers want kids to be successful. Beating them up with scores is not motivation moving forward. Besides, your best staff are already doing that to themselves. Your job is to lift them off and show them the direction. At this point in your careers, I'm guessing you've all worked with SMART goals. The next step as a leader is to make sure that it's not just a SMART goal that interests you and your work, not an individual SMART goal, but one that the whole building can get behind. In this era of SLOs, perhaps you have a cascading goal from the district that the building breaks down a bit smaller, and then the individual teachers can cascade it down one more step to inside the walls of their classroom. Alignment is important. Zoom out and determine if your goals align with the vision, the mission, and perhaps most importantly, with your values. Are you focusing on something that is going to bring your organization closer to realizing that vision and demonstrates your values? I also like to talk about setting goals and using data so that they can act like a checkup at the doctor's office. If the only data that you are using to inform your progress as an organization is end of year data, it's really more like an autopsy than a checkup. Challenge your teams to find multiple data sources throughout the year as check ins towards your progress. This triangulation of data is healthy and helps people investment in the process. Plus, it gives you multiple opportunities to embed celebrations throughout the year, as opposed to waiting for the autopsy. Done well, this framework throughout your organization becomes the flywheel that drives the improvement efforts. Whether it's the administrative team doing the PDSA, a PLC of teachers working through their next instructional unit, or even a group of students that are setting their goals in one of their content areas. Being intentional about each of the pieces is the recipe for success, and you can't shortchange the action research cycle. Some teams do this on a 10-day cycle for rapid improvement. Some do it by unit. Others take each semester as a cycle. The time is completely flexible. Giving each of the stages their due diligence is not flexible. Have you heard the term freedom within fences? Here's an example. Everyone will be working on a PDSA cycle. These components are critical to the process and are required. The topic and timeline of the cycle are for your team to determine. Freedom within fences or clarity of expectations, both are appreciated by those that you are leading. When you consider strategies, I think we're quick to default to looking for an expert to come in and make things happen for us. There are so many other possibilities. One size most definitely does not fit all. Making sure that we don't try to fix every problem with the exact same solution is important. Fine tuning and using the path of least resistance first should always be considered. Resources are always going to be a challenge. Our dollars are definitely finite, and sending people out all the time is also too costly and leaves most with challenges and lack of substitutes to cover their classrooms. Some of these other suggestions or strategies don't cost you anything but the time it takes to make it happen. Distributed leadership, utilizing the experts within, encouraging being a reflective practitioner, it's all really great stuff. Notice the communities of practice bubble. What this says to me is that the culture of our schools is so strong, everyone within knows how we interact with one another. The next slide has a graphic on it that I'd like you to take a look at. As you're looking, consider which of these traits your current community is already very strong in, which you should prioritize as an area of improvement, and finally, really consider how it would feel to be a part of a community that exemplifies all of this. I hate to be one of those people, and I hate to say it, but back in the day, principals were not necessarily trained as instructional leaders. They managed their buildings. Buildings, budgets, and buses. Does that sound familiar? Well, those days are long gone. Currently, principals are either doing the presenting of the professional development or are actively participating in the new learning side by side with their staff members. Schools cannot improve in spite of their leader. That leadership role is absolutely the difference maker. If you are working towards your principal licensure, this is your task to carry. If you are currently working at a district office licensure, your job is to figure out ways to support and to create scaffolding to ensure that that principal is the leader that is needed to move that school forward. Again, schools cannot improve in spite of their leader. That leadership role is absolutely the difference maker. You've heard me mention celebrations several times throughout this module. I'm a firm believer in working hard and playing hard. The work we do is difficult and challenging work, all of it. Nobody that works in education is doing it as an easy way to earn a few bucks. We're deeply and emotionally invested in the success of our kids. If we don't take the opportunity to celebrate our accomplishments along the way, we find ourselves pouring from an empty cup. You've got to make the social investment in your teams and work toward that community of practice we talked about earlier. When you read this slide, it says it's going to take a minimum of 2 years before you're moving the big needle. That's a long time to wait to congratulate someone for a job well done. As the leader, this is on you. The whole idea of enjoy the journey, you've got to be intentional about identifying celebratory moments along that journey. Create that culture of gratitude and high achievement. The quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Don't let the best laid plans and strategic action plans be wasted on a culture that simply isn't functional.